name is Shavoynda Barrow. I was invited to do Testimony Tuesday by Minister Javarius Harrison. I would like to share my testimony with you all today. I normally don't get on Facebook with my life stories or life events, anything. I think this may be the first video that I have done on a social media platform. But this is an assignment from a man of God by God. So I have to be obedient. Before I get into my testimony, I would first like to read a scripture that is related to the actual events that occurred today of my testimony. So the scripture will come from Proverbs 3rd chapter, 5th through the 6th verse. And it reads, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path." To me, that scripture is saying that we need to have more trust in God. A lot of times we give up so fast, or we doubt God so fast because to our own understanding, the situation don't make sense. Like if you get cancer, I eat right, I exercise. Why me? Why did I get it? If you lose your job, I'm the best worker there. Why did I lose this job? If you can't pay your bills, you're like, God, I work hard, I try. Why am I struggling? We so quick to fold and forget about that faith that we should have in God, that only thing we need to do in the time of trouble is to get on our knees and pray and ask God for guidance, protection, to lead us into the right direction. But it's so many times that when the trouble actually comes, we forget about God. So I want us to refocus and put faith in God. Know that He can provide, and He will lead you to the right solution of whatever the problem may be at hand. Know there's nothing too big for God. There's no medical diagnosis that's too big for God. There's no financial situation that's too big for God. There's no marital problems that's too big for God. There's nothing too big for God. Nothing. Because in the end, God's going to do His will. So the only thing we can do is trust that that was God's will, and that God's will be done. So I wanted to say that before I actually got into my testimony, to encourage everyone out there that's listening to have trust in God. He will pull you through any and everything. And if it seems like it's not the right thing for you, just know God already has a plan for you. So we can't see it at that time, but God will eventually show you the end results, and you will understand why you went through what you went through, or why that happened to you. God is always protecting, even when we don't know He protecting us. It's times we can be driving down the road and we was about to turn right, but we turned left because of traffic, because of what we thought was too much traffic, or because of what we thought, nah, I'm gonna just go the other way. I'm gonna go the shortcut today. But that was actually God's protection, because if you actually would have traveled down that road that you normally travel down, trouble probably was down that road that day. And that's just life, period. Sometimes we end up in situations because we don't listen to the signs that God gives us. We ignore the signs. So start paying attention to the little signs that God give us. And I promise you, He will heal your life. He will make everything okay. He will put everything in perspective, and everything will make sense, and life will be good. Now, you will still have trials and tribulations, but you still have to remember to put those problems into God's hand and have faith that He will take care of them, and the outcome will be overwhelming. So let's work on having trust in God and not in man, even with the pandemic and everything that's going on in the world today. The gun violence. Let's have more faith in God, not in man. Let's stop depending on man to do what God already is working on doing. So if we all get together, rally together, and pray, ask for God to heal the United States of America, that will happen. So without further delay, I would just like to get into my testimony. I will speak my testimony. I hope that my testimony touched someone. I hope that my testimony helped someone. That's the only reason I'm telling my testimony, because God put me through a test, and He gave me this testimony to share with the world. And not only is my testimony a testimony, it's a miracle, y'all. A couple of miracles happened that day, and I just would, like to share that with you. On February the 13th, 1996, I was living at home with my parents. I previously was married to my kid's father. Me and my kid's father, we had 3 kids. We were so young, and the marriage just did not work. So he moved back home with his parents. I moved back home with my parents. I was pregnant with my 3rd child. And so at the time I only had 2 kids, which was my 2 boys, ages 2 and 1. So that particular morning I woke up late, and I had already gotten into trouble at my job. I've been written up at my job for being late. So I woke up kind of like in a panic because of that. So when it happened, I I was like, okay, let me get myself together and get out of here and get on the road. So that morning, my dad also knocked on the door, the bedroom door that me and my kids were in, and he was like, um, "You need to, get on the road because, I normally be gone before he left go to work." So that particular morning, I guess he was getting ready to go, and I was still there. So he was, just letting me know, time, for me to get to work and get the kids to the daycare. So I proceeded to leave. And every morning when I leave to go to work and take my kids to daycare, I put the 2 boys in the back seat. I put the 2-year-old, he wasn't in a car seat. I just put the actual seatbelt over him. And the 1-year-old was in a car seat. So I put him in the car seat, and I buckled the car seat down to the car, and then I put the car the seat belt over the car seat after I buckled the actual car, tie the car seat down to the car. So that particular morning I was already late, and I felt like I don't have time to do all that. I don't have time to um tie the car seat down to the car and then put him in and then tie him. I felt like I didn't have time to do that. So I put the 1-year-old that was in his car seat in the front seat with me. Um, and then, so he was on the passenger side in the front seat. And I put the seat belt over the car seat, just the regular car seat. It was, but the car seat wasn't tied down. It wasn't fastened. So it wasn't strutty. It was like shaky. If you turn, it would have, So um, I proceeded to go to work. I worked at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. I worked in the emergency room. I was a registration clerk. in the emergency room at that time. So I was traveling through to Midway, and on my way traveling to Midway that particular morning, the strangest thing happened. Something happened that never had happened again. I've never seen it happen again or heard of it happening with anyone else. But that particular morning, if you ever seen the sun so bright, imagine that brightness times 5. So the sun was so bright that morning, it was literally like a light, more than the sun. And it was just really, it was like the brightest I've ever seen. It was different that morning. And I was getting ready to pull over off the road, but I felt like I could drive past it because, sometimes if you drive past the glare, you find. So I felt like I could just drive past it and, you know, continue my route. So that's all I remember as far as that. So the next thing I remember is waking up. And I remember waking up saying, oh my God, I'm going to be late for work. And I tried to get up to, I guess, to get up to get ready. I don't know. And I couldn't move. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't move anything. So I'm like, what is going on? And I remember at that time I saw blood dripping, and I'm like, okay, what is going on? And at that time, when I saw the blood dripping, I actually moved I had one arm that I could actually move. So I moved my arm, or maybe it was just my fingers I moved. I don't think it was the arm. I think I moved my fingers. And I heard someone say, she just moved. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? That's when I actually start speaking. What is going on? And I heard a lady's voice say, just stay calm. You've been in an accident. And I'm like, okay, um, but what happened? What's going on? She said, I just want you to stay calm and try not to move too much. And but more important, I want you to stay calm. And so she didn't tell me what was going on. So I then asked about my kids. I said, well, where are my kids? And she said, we have 2 boys. We have both boys. She said, one is fine and the paramedics is working with the other one. And so I was relieved to know that they had both boys. So pretty much after I asked about my boys, I heard a guy tell the lady, he said, ma'am, please get from under that bus. This car is going to blow up. So at that time, I realized that my car was under a school bus, that I was trapped in my car up under a school bus. So I want you all to imagine, not these new school buses, the old school bus. I want you all to imagine a car that has been bent and under a school bus. I was crushed inside of my car up under the school bus. So at that time, I started talking to God. But the amazing thing about that is I wasn't a stranger to him. I was raised in a Christian family. I was raised by a dad that believed in prayer, that believed in taking us to Sunday school, taking us to church. I wasn't a stranger to God. So I called God and I'm like, God, I guess I'm getting ready to come be with you. Um, but, you know, please take care of my boys. that was my prayer at that time. That was my thought process at that time. I thought me and the baby that was in me was getting ready to die because the guy said that the car was getting ready to blow up. So I I talked to God, and the lady, I squeezed her hand so tight. It was so selfish of me at that moment. But I asked her, I said, please don't leave me. And she didn't. She was an investigator. She was a white lady. She was an investigator with, I think, Tallahassee Police Department. Um, she stayed knowing she was risking her life under that bus with me and held my hand. And she didn't even know me. So at that time, she told me, she said, I hear them coming. I hear the jaws of life coming. So we're about to get you from under here. She said, I'm getting ready to leave for a minute. She said, but just know I'm still here. She said, your dad is here. He's with your son. So I felt a little relief, and I didn't know what the jaws of life was. You know, I had no idea what was the jaws of life. So the jaws of life came, and the jaws of life actually pulled the car from under the bus. And when they pulled the car from under the bus, um, they transported me to the hospital. My 1-year-old son, he was life flighted to TMH. I actually went in the ambulance. I didn't even have to get life flighted. They got me stable enough to transport me via ambulance. My 2-year-old was fine, so he actually was with family. They just checked him out at the scene of the accident, and he was fine. So I went to the hospital, TMH, where I work, in the emergency room where I work. And, I get to the hospital and they check me out. They do everything. Um, and I remember a doctor coming in and he said, I don't know what God is doing at this moment. He said, I heard about what happened to you. And he said, it's amazing. And he said, I don't know what God is doing at this moment, but you're a special person. He said, do you know someone, my 2 front teeth came completely out my mouth. He said, do you know someone bought your 2 teeth? Someone took the time out, picked my 2 teeth up from the car accident, brought them to the hospital. And I was like, wow. I was like, too bad, they're out. He said, no, they can be put back in. He said, if an oral surgeon is here on call, we would get them put back in. So they called a oral surgeon, Dr. Pajut, and he was there. He was there at the hospital on call. He came down to the emergency room and he stuck them right back in. No problem. I didn't feel a thing because it was so much going on with my body and everything at the time that I didn't feel anything. They checked the baby, and the baby that I was pregnant with was fine. Normal, normal heart rate, normal movement, everything was fine. They did an ultrasound, everything appeared to be fine with her. So I asked them about my 1-year-old, is he okay? And everyone kept not wanting to talk to me about my 1-year-old son. And I remember one of the nurses came in and she said, okay, let's let's figure out how we're going to do this. And I said, how we're going to do what? And she said, your visitors. I said, oh, my parents is here. She was like, oh, no, baby. She said, you have a lobby full of people. She said the whole entire ER lobby is full because everyone thought you had passed at that accident. She said, but we reassured them that you're still with us and that you're going to be okay. So she said, we'll do 2, 3 at a time. I had classmates there. I had friends there. I had family there. I had friends. So it was a joy to see everyone. But the most special visit was the lady that was under the bus with me. She actually came to the hospital because she took off from work that day. I guess she was overwhelmed with emotions, and she actually came to the hospital that day, and she told me, she will remember this day for the rest of her life. And I thanked her, and I asked her, because I know she worked with the police department, what happened? And this is what she said. She said that I was riding down the road. She said, this is per the car that was behind me. I was riding down the road and the bus had stopped to pick up some kids in Midway. It's like a mile before you get to the flying J. The bus had stopped to pick up some kids. And she said that the car behind me said that my car was in full speed ahead. She said, and the car behind me said that right before my car went under the bus, right before it went under the bus, I fell to the left, to the right. I fell towards my passenger seat. And then my car went under. And she said that right before my son, the 2-year-old, went under, it stopped. So the whole top of the car was gone, y'all. And right before my 2-year-old went under, it stopped. It didn't go under. It stopped. The side that my 1-year-old would have been under, it went under. The guy that told the lady to get from under the bus with me, he actually broke the car window enough, the glass out enough, wiggled my son out of that car seat and got him out. That's how my son survived. That's how my son got out the car. If I would have put him in the back seat like I normally do, tied him down, he wouldn't be with us today. Because I put him in that front seat and he wasn't fastened down like he normally is, he was able to move the car seat in a way to pull him out, to get him out. During pulling him out, he was all cut up. When he got to the hospital, you can see flesh. His skin on his face especially. And she said that's what happened. All my vital signs was normal. I've never done drugs. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I drink sociably, but I'm not an alcoholic. So none of that was in my system. So I don't have seizures. I didn't have a heart attack. It was nothing man could explain why that happened. What happened? Why we survived. So I asked her, I told her I really wanted to know about my son. And she went and found out, and she came back and told me that he was fine, that they finally got him stable, and that the doctor would be in to talk with me. So the doctor came in while me and her was talking and told me that my son actually left in the um what am I trying to say? Life flight. They lost him in life flight. They brought him back. Once they got to the hospital, they could not get him stable, and they lost him again. Um, and then just when they was getting ready to give up, a doctor in that room said, just because this is a child, let's just try one more time. And they tried again, and my son came back, and they got him stable. They got him transferred, and everything. He was fine. So I got admitted. I went to my room, and I remember looking in I found a mirror. The old bedside tables had like a mirror in them. So I found a mirror, and I was kind of scared to look because I had been bleeding from my neck, my forehead, um, and around my mouth area, in my mouth because of my teeth. And I was scared to look in the mirror because I didn't know what I was going to see. So I finally built up my nerves, and I pulled the mirror out and I looked, and I was like, oh my God, I had this huge gash on my forehead. It was huge. The hematoma was huge. Um, I had a slit on my throat, on my throat area. And of course I had the two teeth, but it was still like bloody in that area. Um, and I was like, oh my God. So I figured at that time, I'm not gonna look the same. After all of this here, I'm gonna have this huge scar on my forehead. I'm gonna have this scar on my throat area. So at that time, when I was actually looking in the mirror at myself, the late Bobby Neely walked into my room, and he said, what you looking in that mirror for? I was like, oh, I was looking at these scars, and I was like, oh, he was like, don't, don't pay attention to that. He said, all of that's gonna go away, and you're gonna be as beautiful as ever. He said, so he said, all that's gonna go away. And at that time, that's what I needed. That's what I needed to hear. That's what uplifted me, knowing that just give it time to heal, you know? And we have to give things time to heal. It might look ugly, but if you give things time to heal, it'll turn out absolutely beautiful, flawless. So I had faith that would happen at that time. Um, then I wanted to go visit my son. So they finally got me stable enough where they can put me in a wheelchair and take me around the corner to see my son. And when I went to go see my son, his eyes were shut closed. His eyes was like the size of golf balls. They were huge, and they were shut closed. He could not open them. They had been putting saline on them. They was being very careful of his eyes because they didn't know if glass had gotten into his eyes during the impact of the crash. So they were afraid, and being very careful of his eyes. So finally, I got discharged. I went home. My parents came and picked me up, and I just remember my parents was in the front seat and I was in the back seat. And I remember we were on our way to their house. And I remember sitting back there because their face was so full of joy. It's like they was taking me home from the hospital for the first time, like a parent feel when you're taking your newborn baby home. That's the feeling I got from them, because On that day, they could have lost their daughter and all three of their grandkids. Like so many parents have. So many parents have made that trip to the hospital. They didn't get that outcome. They get to take their child home. So I felt so much joy at that moment that God favored me and my kids so much that He put us through something that traumatic, that deadly, and brought us through. At that moment, I realized that God's going to be with me when man turned their back on me. I knew from that day on that God got me. And I never questioned Him again. Never. So I went home and my son had to stay at the hospital. So I went every day to visit him, and I eventually just stayed there with him because I couldn't sleep or anything. So worried about him. So I eventually just stayed at the hospital till he was discharged. He was discharged, and it was like, oh, he's gonna have these horrible seizures and these grandma seizures, and because of the impact. And I asked him, I said, well, did he ever have a seizure? I said, because no one told me. And it was like, no, he haven't had one, but due to that impact, that's something you probably can expect to happen. And being in the medical field, I understand that. But God be the glory, that never happened. He never had seizures. If you see my son today, he has scars on the right side of his face. Those scars is where they had to pretty much put his skin back on his face. They had to take skin from various parts of his body and put it on his face to put his face back together, because it was all torn and destroyed in the accident. So he still has some scars on his face, with showing where that happened. And I remember I wanted to get it covered up, okay, I don't want these scars on my son's face. But now when I look at my son and look at those scars, it reminds me of this story. It reminds me of how good God is. It reminds me of how God showed favor. So those scars are absolutely beautiful to me. Now, the story doesn't end there. So I had the baby in May. The accident happened in February, so I had the baby in May, the little girl. And when I went to the hospital to have the little girl, my daughter, I pushed her out, and my mom was in the room with me, and her dad was in the room with me. And I remember the doctor's face, a face of shock. And I'm like, oh my God. There I go again, feeling like, okay, what happened? Thinking the worst, preparing myself for the worst. And my daughter was not fully connected to me, due to the accident. Something happened where she wasn't fully connected to me. So for 3 months, she was not getting fed, or her blood supply, oxygen, everything that is provided from the mother to the child. She was not connected. And the doctor was supposed to do an ultrasound 6 weeks after the accident. And I guess that's something she overlooked. I don't know, and I think that she probably would have caught that she wasn't connected, and they probably would have delivered her premature, but she didn't. And my baby was born not fully connected to me. But that was okay because God had already worked it out. She went home in 3 days. She was fine. No problems. She was 5 pounds, but I had all my kids was low birth weight. So that wasn't nothing out the norm. Um, so again, that shows God's favor, God's grace, God's mercy over this whole entire situation. And I thank Him to this day for bringing us through that. And to let everyone know that God is still performing miracles. He performed several that day. Um, Stay encouraged. And for ending, I would like to say a week after that accident happened, I was told by someone that had read the newspaper that another lady, if her family's listening, I don't know her name. I wouldn't mention it even if I did. Just respect for families. But she lost her life. She went under a school bus. The same thing that happened to me. Her head was decapitated and she lost her life. And I remember going into this silence with God and talking to God at that moment and thanking Him so much for showing me favor and praying for this lady and her family. Like, God, that could have been me just a week ago. So continue to stay prayed up. Continue to show God the glory. I thank you all for listening so much, and may this testimony be a word for those who needed it. And thank you.